Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a deck profile of Metalfoes. Now, pendulums as a mechanic have gone through a lot of changes over the few years that they've been around. When they were first introduced in the R.I.P or Master Rule 3 era, it was insane being able to pendulum summon 5 monsters back from the Extra Deck as just a straight plus on top of everything else the themes were able to do. Then in Link era, the theme got very much restricted in that we were only able to pendulum summon to zones Link monsters point to, or the one extra monster zones if for whatever reason we could not commit our Link monster to the field. Then shortly after, we ended up getting Heavy Metalfoes Electrumite, which in the TCG is banned today because of how amazing it was even under those restrictions. And now, although pendulums are the only extra deck mechanic that have not been freed up besides Link monsters and being able to just go to the main monster zones, it's still a very good boost to Metalfoes because we can now summon our fusion monsters to different zones in the main monster row and then commit the rest of our linked arrows to our pendulum summon so they're not directly competing with each other. And personally, Metalfoes have always been just an awesome, fun theme to revisit. From having DZ feature my 𝗼𝗿cie Metalfoes deck on his channel a few years back, to the various incarnations of this deck I ended up creating with Heavy Metalfoes Electrumite, this deck has been a part of many awesome memories. And despite all that, I gotta say, this current build, I think has to be my favorite Metalfoes build to date. It's just absurd what this deck is able to do with some of the indirect support that came to the theme over the years, and I'm very excited to share this build with you guys. As always, it's going to be a let's build, so I'll explain my choices and reasoning for why cards are in here in the amounts they are, and then hopefully if you have differences in opinion, you can go ahead and tweak it from the starting point to whatever you would like. If you want to just see the profile in the alphabetical standard fashion as you see on other channels, I always have the description box contain a table of contents with timestamps that'll take you to the various sections, including that A to Z profile. And I do want to let you guys know that YouTube is finally integrating those timestamps I've been using all these years into their chapters system, and I finally figured out how to make that work. So if you want to see this video in its various segments, you can go ahead and see that, hopefully on mobile as well. It should make it a better viewing experience for everyone. And then one last thing to note real quick, this is a deck I've revisited so many times that I've done many profiles and kind of repeated myself for the various cards that go into the Metalfoes core. So to save us some time, if you check the top right hand eye card for my in-depth introduction to Metalfoes, it will get you caught up in case you've never seen the deck before or just need a primer. And then in this video, we'll jump right in with the good stuff. So without further ado, let's build Metalfoes. The first step in building any deck is to establish the theme and to build a core that supports the theme's goals. Now, in case you skipped the introduction to this video, I do want to point out real quick that if you check the iCard in the top right-hand corner, I have a link to my in-depth introduction to Metalfoes to hopefully save you guys some time in teaching you how Metalfoes work, or at least giving you a primer if it's been a little bit. Honestly, the last half of that video might not be up to date with the Master Rule 5 updates and with things like Heavy Metalfoes Electrumite being banned, but I think the first half of that video is going to be a very good starting point in case you need to check out what these cards do and you want to visit the theme for the first time, at least in a while. So with that out of the way, we're starting off our core with 3 copies of every single Metalfoes card available to us in the monsters, and that means 3 Volflame, 3 Gold Driver, 3 Silvered, 3 Steelin for all of our vanillas, and even 3 copies of Rare Metalfoes Bismugear. These cards, of course, are all scale 1 or 8, have various levels and stats. They're all Psychic Fire Pendulum monsters, and they have the same scale ability of once per turn, not a hard once per turn, targeting one other face-up card you control and destroying it to then search a Metalfoes themed spell or trap directly from your deck and setting it to your board, which is nice because that gets around many hand traps. And then Bismugear has one bonus ability where if he's destroyed, in the end phase, search a Metalfoes monster, including another copy of Bismugear, and then that search there is a hard once per turn, but you can see how this theme is able to abuse that soft once per turn ability by just playing multiple copies and maybe even recycling themselves or each other. So right off the bat, we're starting off with 15 Metalfoes monsters to maximize our consistency there, but that's not where we're stopping. We're also playing 3 copies of Summoner's Art, which is a Rhoda-like spell that just says add Volflame from your deck to your hand. It's gonna add a level 5 or higher normal monster, which in this case is just going to be that. You could play around with the Cleafort package, but personally, when I did, I ended up always hard drawing the Monolith, never the Scout for some reason, and, drawing your Brick isn't going to be a good investment for a Cyber Dragon Infinity play when, 1, it doesn't work some of the time, and 2, you end up committing 2 cards to your extra deck just for that. Don't get me wrong, it's a powerful engine when it goes off because Cyber Dragon Infinity is still great to this day. I just didn't want that inconsistency, and I wanted to use Summoner's Art as just 3 more copies of Metalfoes Volflame to bring us up effectively to 18, and then we're capping that up to 20 by playing 2 copies of Painful Decision, which is a hard once per turn spell that says send a level 4 or lower normal monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, add 1 card with the same name from your deck directly to your hand. If this weren't a hard once per turn, I would honestly play 3 of them, but as it stands, it's not worth drawing into multiple cards that potentially could end up being dead, and that's why we play just the 2 Painful Decision. But right there, we're already up to half of our deck. 20 out of 40 cards are Metalfoes cards, effectively all with the same abilities. Next up, we're going to take a look at the cards that the Metalfoes cards search, and first off, we're going to look at the fusion cards, Metalfoes Fusion and Full Metalfoes Fusion, both of which you only really need 1 copy. Metalfoes Fusion is your polymerization for the theme, allowing you to fusion summon a Metalfoes monster using the monsters in your hand or on your field, and then it has a bonus recycle ability that lets you put it from your graveyard back into your deck, shuffle it up, and then draw 1 random card, and that's a pretty powerful ability because now your fusion summons end up costing 1 card less because Metalfoes Fusion will recycle and then replace itself. It also means you're able to reuse Metalfoes Fusion multiple times in a turn, which allows you to summon multiple fusion monsters. Full Metalfoes Fusion is a quick play spell that's really just that. It's just a quick play fusion spell, kind of like 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏 Fusion, lets you put out a Metalfoes monster during your opponent's turn, and the whole point of that is to combine Full Metalfoes Fusion with Metalfoes 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏. This is a level 8 fusion monster that needs any 2 Metalfoes monsters, and if you happen to have a Metalfoes monster attack your opponent's defense monster, you're able to do double piercing damage with any of your Metalfoes, which is kind of like Chaos Max Dragon as a field spell for your Metalfoes, but that's not the main reason we play it, although yes, that could steal games. The whole reason we run the 1 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏 is because if this card is sent to the graveyard, even through you fusioning it away off of the Full Metalfoes Fusion during your opponent's turn, you could target 1 card on the field and destroy it. That means that these 2 cards combo perfectly in bringing out a copy of Full Metalfoes 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏, which needs a Metalfoes monster and a normal monster, probably a copy of a Metalfoe that you search during the end phase with your Bismugear. When you activate Full Metalfoes Fusion using 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏 and a vanilla monster, you're able to then trigger its ability upon summoning your 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏, pop a card off this, and then 𝗼𝗼𝗄𝗏 is live to steal 1 of your opponent's effect monsters during their turn as well for a back-to-back 1-2 punch of disruption that's able to stop a lot of your opponent's key plays. So that's kind of the bread and butter combo you're aiming for in Metalfoes. If you have a ton of Metalfoes, you're able to accomplish that very consistently, and it helps that we're running, again, half of our deck is just straight up Metalfoes monsters or cards that search them. Then I want to briefly touch upon Metalfoes Mithrilium. This is a card that you want to at least run 1 copy of, and in my in-depth intro, I honestly talked about running 3 of these things. If I could fit 3, I still would play it. I just could not afford to with all of the great extra deck options available to us. But effectively, this card's able to recycle your own cards from the graveyard and bounce a card on the field back to the hand. That could be one of your opponent's cards that's immune to destruction and needs to just get off the field, or it could be one of your own cards like a Metalfoes Scale or a Floodgate that you can then reuse, because again, the Metalfoes monsters as pendulum scales don't have a hard once per turn effect, it's just once while they're on the field. The first Mithrilium is really good at doing that, but it is a hard once per turn on the recycle effect and the bounce effect there. However, playing a second Mithrilium adds a lot of value because anytime Mithrilium goes to the graveyard from the field, you're able to float into a new Metalfoe from your graveyard or face up from your extra deck, which means you could summon a Mithrilium, then fusion into another Mithrilium, which will get you a free float, allow you to continue making your plays, and you could use the second to even recycle that first one back, effectively giving you an infinite grind game as long as your opponent's not able to negate that Mithrilium. A tall order these days, and one reason why I would love to play 3 if I could have the room for it. But even so, just having the second one adds a ton of unique value that you don't get with 1. However, you probably could get away with the faster speed of today's metagames with just the 1 copy. So at least 1 copy I think is a must. It's just a really flexible card that takes use of all the other pendulums you may be teching into the strategy. The second copy does give you a nice little bonus though, so definitely consider playing at least that second copy. And now that we're done talking about the main fusions we're playing, we're going to talk about the trap cards that the Metalfoes can search, and we're still playing 2, however, wait, where's Counter? Why do we have 2 copies of Metalfoes Combination? Well, Counter's not a bad card. It's able to get you 2 cards over the course of 2 turns, which is pretty decent for that 1 card you searched for free. It effectively becomes a plus, and it is a valuable card when you can get it off. However, Metalfoes Combination is the card we're abusing today because of its 2 awesome abilities. First, its normal ability, of course, lets you recycle a monster. So for example, if you summon an 𝗼𝗿cie and you have Mithrilium in your graveyard, you're able to go and summon back the Mithrilium, who would have floated in the first place, and then if she goes to the grave again that turn, she'll still float because that floating ability is not a hard once per turn. That's all good and everything, but in this strategy, we're abusing the heck out of its second ability that says if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, even if it was face down, you're able to search a Metalfoes card from your deck to your hand. It would be a monster, but of course, your spells and traps are all searchable anyway, so no big deal there. We play 2 of these cards because we're able to send them directly from field to grave to abuse our Magician's Souls. Now, this is a card, of course, that I talked about at length in the Dark Magician strategy, but it just works wonders in this deck. First, you're able to special summon it for free by sending a level 6 or higher spellcaster from your deck to the graveyard, and in this deck, we're playing something like Dragon Pit Magician, where you could run Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic. Heck, for a while, until I had those 2 cards in my possession, I ended up playing Dark Magician as a proxy, and it still worked. That's how good these cards are. I'll talk a little bit more later in the deck when I talk about the extra deck of why I specifically chose Dragon Pit Magician, but generally you want a Pendulum monster in order to maximize the utility in this strategy. Send this directly from your deck to the grave in order to special summon a copy of Magician's Souls, or heck, even if you normal summon this guy, you're able to send up to 2 spell or traps from your hand and or field to the graveyard to draw that many cards. Now, one of the problems I had with this card and its price tag in the Dark Magician deck is oftentimes you end up getting this card hand trapped with an effect veiler or something, and then you get no draws, but you paid those 2 cards as cost. However, in this deck, you're able to send your 2 Metalfoes Combinations that you can search every game to the graveyard as cost, so even if your opponent tries to interrupt you with a hand trap, okay, fine, you don't get the draws, they burned a hand trap, and now you get 2 Metalfoes Combination searches, which means you end up getting what you want out of the strategy anyway. And in the event your opponent cannot stop you, you're drawing 2 cards on top of that, giving you 4 fresh cards, in addition to Magician's Souls being on the field as link material for later, and Dragon Pit Magician or some other spellcaster being sent to the graveyard as a resource to use off of something like Selene. So this card just generates so much advantage. It is insane what it's able to do for the Metalfoes theme. I honestly discovered this when I was watching Yasin656's channel. If you guys have not seen him, I'll link him in the description below, but definitely check him out. He just deserves so much attention, more than he has right now. Honestly, I've seen a Cyber Dragon deck that was full of traps. I've seen this deck, and every time I see his stuff, I just nerd out because it's just so amazing combo Yu-Gi-Oh! So definitely go ahead and see that. But the reason I mentioned that is because there are other things you can do, as Yasin ends up doing, and that I'm kind of mirroring as well. We're going to search our Magician's Souls from our deck using Magical Abductor, which is a very interesting pendulum monster because of its 2 abilities. Depending on if you play it as a pendulum scale or as a monster, it will search a different thing, but effectively you fuel this card by playing spell cards or having your opponent do so, either way, and when you reach 3 cards or more, you're able to remove 3 of the spell counters once per turn to search either a level 1 spellcaster monster from your deck to your hand if this was summoned as a monster, so Magician's Souls comes to your hand for free and you could special summon, or you can go ahead and activate this as a spell, have the 3 cards accumulate, and then when you have the 3 spell counters removed, you can search any pendulum monster from your deck, effectively making this into a mini heavy Metalfoes Electrumite, which is still pretty good because we're able to tech in different kinds of pendulum monsters we might not have been able to see anyway. I honestly love the flexibility that this card brings to the deck. Although you generally want to summon this as a monster in order to increase your chances of seeing Magician's Souls, if you happen to already have souls, you could just activate this card, and between your free Rhodas and your Pendulum Scales and Metalfoes Fusion you can easily search and activate, you will very likely get to your 3 spell counters and net another free card off of Abductor's scale ability as well. And the fact that she's level 4 means you could pendulum summon her depending on where in the combo you draw her, because it doesn't matter so much when you activate and resolve that Magician's Souls, you just want to be able to in order to get your free pluses. So Magical Abductor, all around fantastic card, again allows you to make use not only of your Magician's Souls, but also of other pendulum monsters, which we'll talk about in just a second. I do want to mention here briefly that Yasin also goes all in by playing 3 copies of 𝗼𝗿cie in his deck, which is a card that allows you to search Magician Souls as well. You're able to potentially search Bismugear, play it off of Bismugear or Souls, and it's very easy to resolve thanks to Linkross being in the game and spawning level 1 tokens. That's not the direction I wanted to take this deck. I tried that variant, but I found there was something specific I was missing with this strategy, but definitely kudos to him for improving the consistency of the deck even further on that regard. I just didn't like how I kept losing to a certain card named Dragonbuster Destruction Sword, and so instead of playing 𝗼𝗿cie, I ended up playing 3 copies of Archfiend Eccentric. This is a card I've talked about in the past, and it's in that in-depth introduction as well. This is the most flexible form of removal you can find for a Pendulum deck, and it happens to have a bonus interaction in this strategy. So if you summon this as a monster, you can destroy your opponent's Naturia Beast or other annoying creature, and if you activate this as a scale, you can pop it along with a spell or trap, like your opponent's Dragonbuster Destruction Sword. The reason I play this card at 3, in addition to the fact that that maximizes your chance of being able to play by outing your opponent's locks, is the fact that 1, it's a Pendulum monster, so it's perfectly flexible as a material for Mithrilium, searchable off of Abductor and a lot of other Pendulum-specific traits, but it also happens to be a card that can destroy your own Metalfoes combination in a pinch in order to serve as a pseudo-Rhoda. And along those lines, we play 3 copies of Baobaboon instead of some other fillers like Into the Void. So Baobaboon is an interesting card. It's a level 3 dark plant monster with 1200 attack, 1000 defense, and it says if this is summoned, so normal or special, you could Pendulum it as well. You can draw 1 card and place any 1 card from your hand on either the top or bottom of your deck. That's huge because no matter what build of Metalfoes you're playing a few spells and traps that are bricks. Sure, you could probably resolve them or abuse them as some other interaction, but you realistically want to put them back in your deck if possible so you can draw other cards and then you can search them out later so that they're actually meaningful pluses. Baobaboon ensures you're able to do that, and it even puts away some other cards like Eccentric if you don't need it that game, Dragon Pit Magician, other engine requirements that need to stay in there. As if that weren't enough, if you destroy Baobaboon, for example with any of your Metalfoes scale effects, you're able to summon 2 more copies from your deck, and then each of those triggers, so then you get a total of 3 draw filters to dig into your deck and 3 opportunities to put away bad cards you don't want in the top or bottom of your deck. So all around, it's an amazing card. It gets you towards your link plays by being 2 bodies on board, less inconsistencies into your hand, more fresh cards into your hand so you can go ahead and potentially make more plays with the boosted options. All around, I just love the internal consistency of Metalfoes, and Baobaboon directly contributes to all of that in my opinion. So I do like playing 3 copies of this card, ended up testing with and without it, and ultimately I just had to go back to it. It's just that amazing of a card, especially because now without Heavy Metalfoes Electrumite, we're not relying so much more on summoning Pendulum monsters as our initial pair of cards to make our plays. That I would say is the biggest distinction between playing Baobaboon, Magician Souls, a lot of these effect monsters that aren't Pendulums versus the previous builds. You had to use your Rescue Hamster and Rabbit in order to get out your Pendulums so that Electrumite could get your deck going before your Pendulum summon. Nowadays though, your Pendulum summon just gives you 3 monsters back as a free plus, and anything else before that is going to get you set up towards bringing the Link monster out to make that summon happen. Believe it or not, we only have 3 more cards left in our main deck, and I'm going to start off with the least interesting of those. Upstart Goblin is basically just a blank spell card. It contributes to Abductor, it contributes to Selene, as we'll talk about later, but you're just playing 1 fewer card in the deck. You could play something else if you like, but again, I just wanted to increase the overall internal consistency. Next, I like playing 1 copy of Super Polymerization. If you play 3 of this like I was originally doing, you'll find there's some matchups where it's not bad, but it's kind of mediocre, and you don't want to commit a card from your hand to discard because then it ends up being a card you can't play. It's held hostage until your opponent's turn, or the Metalfoes Bismugear search doesn't end up being a meaningful plus to you. So I end up playing just the 1 copy in the main, 2 copies in the side, because that way I can still search it in order to play Metalfoes Crimsonite off of 2 of my opponent's monsters by utilizing Predaplant Verte Anaconda. This card, of course, needs 2 effect monsters and lets you pay 2,000 life points to copy a Super Polymerization or other spell card from your deck and apply his effect as that card's effect. If you're able to summon 2 effect monsters, like 2 Baobaboons or Magical Abductor with Magician Souls, you're you're able to resolve the effect of super polymerization, not as a spell speed 4 because you're not activating the super polymerization spell, and for what it's worth, it does count as the monster effect of 𝗼𝗿𝗍 Anaconda, but you're still able to summon Crimsonite off of any one of your Metalfoes monsters and 2 of your opponent's monsters with 3,000 or less attack. Just having the 1 copy of this and the 2 copies of this in the extra allowed me to feel a lot more at ease. I definitely like these cards in the deck much more than having the 2 Qliphort cards that I mentioned earlier. So having that package, I think, allows you to break a lot more situations that might be more of a dire situation. The last card in our main deck is this disgusting guy. The guy I mentioned before that I didn't want to lose to all the time. You can't beat him, you join him. You know, that kind of a thing here. Dragon Buster makes it so if it's equipped to a monster, your opponent cannot summon monsters from their extra deck. And of course, you're using Union Carrier in order to bring it out. And you guys may be thinking, well, JD, in order to equip Dragon Buster, you need to have either a dark monster or a dragon. So far, there have been 0 dragons, and the only dark monsters all had like 1,200 attack or less. So are you seriously going to activate Union Carrier on one of those? No, we're not going to. The reason we're able to play it, of all things, courtesy of my brother, is First of the Dragons. Now, buckle up, guys. This card is just so hilarious. And this is definitely the spiciest part of this deck, and the reason I love this variant so much. Probably as much, if not more than Magician Souls being just an insane card in the strategy. First of the Dragons is a level 9 Dark Dragon, which is perfect because either of those traits would have been enough for Dragon Buster Destruction Sword off of Union Carrier. It's a fusion that requires 2 normal monsters to summon, which you can easily see how Metalfoes fit the bill quite nicely, and it has 2 restrictions in that it must be fusion summoned, cannot be summoned other ways, and that you can only control 1 copy of this card at a time. Those restrictions are necessary because beyond that, this card is nuts. It cannot be destroyed by battle except by a normal yellow-colored monster, and it is unaffected by other monsters' effects. In reality, this card should not be that broken. You just activate 𝗼𝗿𝗍𝗳𝗶𝗹𝗮, Bottomless Trap Hole. This card should be gone. And true, that's the case, except no one seems to be playing those types of cards. Sure, 𝗟𝗏𝗍 have spells and traps that can out this card, but for the most part, main decks don't have any inherent way of getting rid of First of the Dragons because they rely on their monsters to get rid of something like this through either battle or card effect, which this card specifically does not allow you to do. But when you put it in tandem with Dragon Buster, now your opponent is even more severely crippled. Their deck probably can't function normally in game 1, probably has no good or any out to First of the Dragons, and it oftentimes becomes the win condition of the strategy when you're going first. One of the hallmarks of 𝗼𝗄𝗆's strategy was he was leveraging the free special summons of cards like Selene and Cross Sheep in order to bring out enough materials for an 𝗼𝗿𝗄𝗆 and Odd Eye's Absolute Dragon, which would then turn into a Vortex Dragon, effectively giving you like 7 to 9 negates, and that is insane. I just, again, can't get enough of how awesome that is. However, as my brother put it, why put up 4, 5 more negates when you could just summon out an invincible monster effectively game 1 and make it so your opponent can't even play? If they can't throw cards at you to even negate, you're effectively getting infinite negates. So big shout out to my brother for finding this stuff out, and of course that just means that I've been playing against this strategy for the last few weeks here, because get this is not exclusive to the Metalfoes theme. Some of you guys may be looking at this card and thinking, wait, so you have vanillas, but how can you summon this? You're not relying on super poly, right? And that's true. Metalfoes Fusion and full Metalfoes Fusion can only summon Metalfoes monsters, but it just so happens that we're able to turn our effect monsters into link monsters and then turn them into Linkross to generate 2 vanilla tokens or more in any strategy playing Needle Fiber, for example. And you're also able to turn that Linkross into Proxy F Magician, a common card that honestly most people didn't even look at. Another big thanks to my brother for actually looking through my Eternity Code commons and finding out, wait, this card's actually busted. It is a Link 2 generic monster that just needs 2 effect monsters to summon, has the diagonal arrows you can see, and it says during your main phase, without paying any cost, you could just fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control as materials, and if you fusion summon to a zone this card points to, you're able to go and special summon a weak monster with 1,000 or less attack from your hand. That effect is a nice bonus in that it gets you out maybe Magician Souls or Bismugear that you can't pendulum summon out between scales 1 and 8, but on top of that, Proxy F Magician can now utilize the tokens you generate off of Linkross or the Metalfoes you pendulum out from your extra under this card as materials to summon first of the dragons, and because Proxy F is effectively polymerization that you carry around in your extra deck that you can summon off of Baobaboon or the duo of Magical Abductor and Magician Souls, this card ends up becoming far more consistent than any fusion spell or a card you could play in the main deck, and it effectively makes it so game 1, you're going to lock out your opponent, move on to game 2, and then you can continue playing the strategy as intended. So very, very insane. Again, this is a strategy you can tech into a lot of different strategies. Once my brother found this combo, he basically started splashing it into everything he could with Needle Fiber as the card that kicks it all off, and it's just nuts what it's able to do. So definitely try it out. Even if you don't play this Metalfoes build today, I implore you guys to at least check out that combo because it's just too good and too BM of a common card to not try out at least once and just see the reaction on your opponent's face. Oh yeah, and one other thing to mention about Proxy F Magician and Union Carrier is that Union Carrier's requirement is of course 2 monsters with the same type or attribute, and as simple as that is to do with just Metalfoes, Proxy F Magician's a fire monster, which means you can combine it with any of your Metalfoes as well. Now it's time to talk about the last 5 Link monsters in the extra deck, and although they came at the end here, I do want to emphasize that this doesn't make them less important. We just had so many new ideas to talk about that I didn't get to these until the very end, but you could say cards like Link Spider are an absolute staple in Metalfoes. This card needs a normal monster to summon, can summon out a low-level normal monster from your hand to the zone it points to, and effectively that means if you have 2 vanilla Metalfoes that are low-level, you're able to summon one, turn it into Link Spider, summon the other copy, and now you have 2 monsters that you can turn into either Cross Sheep, who just needs 2 monsters with different names, or 𝗣𝗿𝗲 the Fire Charmer Ablaze, who needs a fire monster and 1 other monster. Both of these are awesome in that they allow you to extend your plays further. If you have a fusion monster in a zone Cross Sheep points to, you can summon a level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard without even negating its effects. So Bismugear, Baobaboon, maybe Magician Souls if you haven't used its ability yet, or if you just want a body on board. All those are fair game, and again, the abilities are perfectly live. Then 𝗣𝗲𝗄 is able to summon out one of your opponent's fallen fire monsters. Ash Blossom, of course, is the #1 pick, but if your opponent's fumbling around and has something like a Jet Synchron that they didn't use lying in there for some reason, you're even able to take advantage of that, which of course is format dependent, but you'll find plenty of opportunities to do that. Once you have those, you can easily climb up from your Link 1 into your Link 2 into your Link 3s, and I'll talk about why these 2 cards are my absolute favorites for this particular strategy. So you could play a Link 4. I honestly didn't because I thought the second Mithrilium was a lot more impactful in this strategy, but again, play around with it as your heart desires. Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians, and Draco Masters of the 𝗍𝗖 are both Link 3s with 3 arrows pointing downward, which I figured was the best arrangement of arrows for a Pendulum deck that wants to summon out 3 monsters every turn it can, and they both are summoned in very similar ways. Selene needs any 2 monsters, including a spellcaster, which, wouldn't you know, not only can Cross Sheep easily bring 1 back, but your 𝗣𝗲𝗄 is a spellcaster monster, and then Draco Masters of the 𝗍𝗖 needs any 2 monsters, including a Link monster, effectively meaning if you summon either of these previous 2 monsters, you're bringing out one of these guys most of the time. Selene, of course, doesn't need too much of an introduction, but I'll list its effect here, and the cool thing you're able to do in this strategy is bring back cards like your Magical Abductor or your Magician Souls, then turn Selene into a Linkross, which gives you now 3 tokens, plus you have the 2 effect monsters between Linkross and whatever you revived, and those 2 can become Proxy F Magician. That's assuming you didn't even bother Pendulum summoning 3, making fusion plays, and then potentially doing the plays after that. All of that's flexible and viable because don't forget, Linkross can summon a number of tokens up to the Link rating of the monster you used, and if you're not going to fuse more than 2 away into First of the Dragons anyway, you might not need that 3rd token. One extra thing I'll note is if you decided to play Endymion, Mighty Master of Magic, as your level 7 monster for Magician Souls, you could revive him and then have that protect Selene from being attacked by your opponent's monsters, effectively allowing this to stay up on the field longer. Then I want to talk more in depth about Draco Masters of the 𝗍𝗖, a card I've wanted to use in Metalfoes for a long time and I'm finally able to showcase for you guys. First, it's got 2600 attack, which is pretty solid, but it can't die by battle with an effect monster anyway, so unless your opponent commits some weird play with like a Nightmare Unicorn to get rid of it, or they just happen to be blessed with free removal along their combo plays, they're probably not going to get rid of this monster as easily as your other Link monsters, and that's big because if this stays around for even one more turn, you get 3 more monsters back for your Pendulum summon. So any additional boost in survivability to your Link monsters is going to be huge over many games. On top of that, the reason we really play this card is if you control no other effect monsters, because everything's a vanilla, you Pendulum vanillas, or you pop all your effect monsters off of your field, you can destroy effect monsters your opponent controls without targeting up to the number of non-effect monsters you control and or in your graveyard, and that is a hard once per turn. So that's the main reason I like playing Dragon Pit Magician instead of any other option in this particular strategy, and why Dark Magician even worked in this deck when I was testing. You have that monster goes into your graveyard anytime you resolve Magician Souls for the free special summon. You probably Pendulum summoned 3 vanilla monsters back from your extra deck, which puts you up to a total of 4, and if you played your copy of Painful Decision earlier, which lets you destroy 5 monsters your opponent controls without targeting. Combine that with the inherent removal flexibility of Metalfoes between �11𝗠 being the textbook target and destroy, Mithrilium being able to bounce things away without destroying, and �11𝗠 being able to absorb monsters without destroying, and you're pretty much able to get rid of most threats out there. So I just love the overall flexibility that Draco Masters of the Tenyi brings. It's an all-around all-star, being able to provide you some arrows, get free removal, stick around on the board, and be just as easy, if not easier, to summon than Selene in a deck like this. So these are the monsters I went for. Again, you could potentially use Selene, let's say, to go into an access code talker, because that's 2 monsters, including a Link 3 monster and another effect monster you revive, but I ended up choosing these specific cards. Definitely consider something else for the extra if you would like in that Mithrilium slot or somewhere else. Maybe you don't want to play the Linkross in the deck because you can generate enough normal monsters for Proxy F, or heck, maybe you think that part is just way too gimmicky, and because it's only a game 1 type of a play, you don't play it at all. But I gotta say, I had a lot of fun with this build so far, and I encourage you guys to at least try it out and just experience what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all about. And with that, our journey concludes with the regular alphabetical deck profile. Special thanks to anyone who watched the entire thing. I know it's a long haul, but hopefully the new chapters feature has helped a lot, so definitely let me know down below what you think about that, and we'll jump right into the main deck here. So we have a slightly different order because we're beginning with 3 copies of every Metalfoe monster, meaning 3 Volflame, 3 Gold Driver, 3 Silvered, 3 Steelin, and 3 Rare Metalfoes Bismugear. He's a rare Metalfoe if you're searching that card. Then we have 3 Summoner's Art and double Painful Decision for a total of 20 cards out of 40 that are all effectively Metalfoes. Then for the rest of the deck, we have 3 copies of Archfiend Eccentric, 3 copies of Baobaboon, 1 Dragonbuster Destruction Sword, triple Magical Abductor, and triple Magician Souls that you want to search. This could be any high-level spellcaster monster, but I do recommend a Pendulum monster, and depending on what Xyz monster you may want to use in your extra deck and other builds, consider the level as well. But lots of options. I'm playing Dragon Pit Magician here. And then for spells, we're playing Metalfoes Fusion, Full Metalfoes Fusion, Upstart Goblin, and Super Polymerization. And then we're playing the 2 copies of Metalfoes Combination to abuse off of the Magician's Souls. For our extra deck, we have Full Metalfoes �11𝗠, double Metalfoes Mithrilium, 1 Metalfoes �11𝗠, and our lone Metalfoes Crimsonite. Then we have our First of the Dragons, wrapping up our fusions. For links, we have Link Spider and Linkross at link 1. We have Cross Sheep, �11, the Fire Charmer Ablaze, Predaplant 𝗿𝗿 Anaconda, Proxy F Magician, and Union Carrier as our link 2s. And then finally for our link 3s, we have Draco Masters of the Tenyi and Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. That's it for now, but feel free to grab one of these videos on your way out. If you really enjoyed what you saw today, remember to subscribe to JDGaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.